Not every villain is just pure evil. Some of them had a point, maybe even a better one than the heroes, but when their ideals turned into obsession, their actions became impossible to justify. Today, we're counting down 10 anime villains who were actually right, but went too far. These are the characters whose goals made sense, but the way they pursued them crossed the line. We'll be ranking them based on how justified their cause was compared to how extreme their methods became. And at number 10, we start with a villain who wanted to fix a broken system, but only ended up making things worse. At number 10, we have Scar from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, a man whose desire for justice was justified, but his methods turned him into the very thing he hated. Scar was a survivor of the Ishvalan Civil War, a brutal massacre where his people were slaughtered by Amestris's military. He had every reason to despise the system that took everything from him. The government treated Ishvalans as expendable, and their deaths were covered up as just another part of history. But here's where things went too far. Scar didn't just seek justice against those responsible, he targeted all state alchemists, even those who had nothing to do with the genocide. His grief and rage blinded him, turning him into a symbol of revenge rather than true justice. This is why Scar lands at number 10 on our list. His cause was justified, but his pursuit of vengeance only fueled more violence. Coming in at number 9, we have Sosuke Aizen from Bleach, a villain who saw through the lies of Soul Society, but used that knowledge for his own pursuit of power. Aizen wasn't just another power-hungry antagonist. He was a visionary who understood that the world he lived in was built on deception. Soul Society wasn't the noble organization it pretended to be. It was a rigid, corrupt system that upheld outdated laws, often sacrificing the innocent for the so-called greater good. He saw the hypocrisy firsthand and knew that the ones in power had no interest in true justice. But here's where things went too far. He didn't want to fix Soul Society. He wanted to rule over it. Instead of dismantling the system and creating something better, he manipulated, betrayed, and slaughtered his way to ultimate power. His goal wasn't justice, it was godhood. He saw himself as superior to all beings, believing the world needed his leadership whether they wanted it or not. At number 8, we have Griffith from Berserk, a man with a vision of greatness, but a willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve it. Griffith was not your typical villain. He wasn't driven by mindless destruction or pure selfishness. Instead, he had a clear goal: to create a kingdom where he could rule as a true king, and to many, that dream was inspiring. He was charismatic, a natural leader, and willing to endure any hardship to reach the top. He believed that the world was cruel, and the only way to escape suffering was through absolute ambition, and in a way, he was right. But here's where things went too far. Griffith's ambition eventually consumed him. When faced with the loss of his dream, he made a sacrifice that no one could ever justify. He gave up his humanity, betraying his closest friends and transforming into Femto, a godlike entity in the service of darkness. The very people who helped him rise to power were offered up in one of the most horrifying betrayals in anime history. This is why Griffith lands at number 8 on our list. His dream was admirable, but his willingness to sacrifice anything, including those who loved him, proved that his vision was never about creating something greater. It was always about himself.
You are our progeny, our newest kinsmen, our wing of darkness. Arise, Femto.
At number 7, we have Light Yagami from Death Note, a man who sought to rid the world of evil but became the very thing he swore to destroy. Light wasn't wrong about the world. Crime, corruption, and injustice ran rampant. When he found the Death Note, he saw it as an opportunity to create a perfect world, one where criminals would be wiped out and only good, law abiding people would remain. His logic was simple: if you eliminate all the bad people, only good people will be left. And for a while, it seemed like it was working. Crime rates dropped, and the world became a more orderly place. But here's where things went too far. Light didn't just want to stop crime, he wanted control. What started as a mission for justice became a god complex. He stopped targeting just criminals and began eliminating anyone who got in his way: innocent detectives, law enforcement, and even those closest to him. He believed himself to be above morality, above judgment, above humanity itself. This is why Light Yagami lands at number 7 on our list. His desire for a better world was understandable, but his belief that he alone had the right to decide who lived and who died made him no different than the criminals he set out to destroy. At number 6, we have Shogo Makishima from Psycho Pass, a man who saw the flaws of a dystopian system but chose destruction over change. In the world of Psycho Pass, society is controlled by the Sybil system, an advanced AI that determines a person's potential for crime before they ever commit one. To most, this system seemed like a utopia. No crime, no chaos, just peace and order. But Makishima saw the truth. Sybil wasn't protecting people, it was controlling them. And honestly, he was right. The system removed free will, turned people into complacent drones, and crushed individuality under the illusion of security. But here's where things went too far. Instead of trying to expose Sybil and wake people up, Makishima chose chaos. He manipulated people into committing violent crimes, encouraged mass murder, and sought to tear the system down with no plan for what would replace it. He didn't want to fix the world, he just wanted to watch it burn.
0. No enforcement action required. Trigger will remain locked.
Yuki, no!
At number 5, we have Obito Uchiha from Naruto, a man whose tragic past led him to believe that the only way to end suffering was to erase reality itself. Obito's life was shaped by pain. As a young shinobi, he was full of hope, dreaming of becoming Hokage. But everything changed when he witnessed the brutal realities of war and the death of the person he loved most, Rin. This shattered his faith in the world, leading him to believe that as long as pain and loss existed, true peace could never be achieved. And honestly, he wasn't entirely wrong. The shinobi world was in a never-ending cycle of violence. One generation of war created the next, and suffering continued endlessly. Obito saw what others refused to accept. As long as free will existed, conflict would never end. So he devised the infinite Tsukuyomi, a plan to trap everyone in an eternal dream, free from pain, war, and suffering. But here's where things went too far. Instead of working to change the real world, he chose to replace it. His dream world would be an illusion, and in creating it, he caused even more destruction than the cycle he wanted to end. He slaughtered countless people, manipulated nations, and even turned his back on the friends who once cared about him. He believed he was saving the world, but in reality, he was just running from his own pain. This is why Obito lands at number 5 on our list. His understanding of suffering was real, but his solution was nothing more than an escape, not true peace. At number 4, we have Zeke Yeager from Attack on Titan, a man who believed that the only way to end suffering was to erase the very people who experienced it. Zeke grew up in a world where Eldians, his people, were persecuted and blamed for the sins of their ancestors. Raised under the strict ideology of his father, he was told that the only way to break the cycle of suffering was through rebellion. But as he got older, Zeke came to a completely different conclusion. The only way to free Eldians from their suffering was to ensure that no more of them were ever born. And in a twisted way, he wasn't entirely wrong. The Eldians were trapped in an endless cycle of oppression, war, and destruction. Whether they were inside the walls or living under Marleyan rule, they were treated as weapons rather than people. Zeke believed that if Eldians simply ceased to exist, the world would no longer have a reason to fear or persecute them. No more suffering, no more war, just a quiet, painless extinction. But here's where things went too far. Zeke's solution took away the very thing that makes life meaningful: choice. Instead of finding a way to change the world for the better, he chose to force his will on an entire race of people. His euthanasia plan would have wiped out an entire generation without giving them a say in their own future. His goal was peace, but his method was nothing short of genocide. This is why Zeke lands at number 4 on our list. He saw the truth about Eldian suffering, but his solution was nothing more than a final, irreversible decision that no one asked for. At number 3, we have Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan, a man who fought for freedom but became the very force of destruction he once swore to stop. Eren started out like any other survivor inside the walls, a child who simply wanted to be free. He witnessed his home being torn apart by titans, his mother being devoured, and his people living as cattle in a cage. His anger and drive to break free from oppression were completely justified. He wasn't wrong to see the walls as a prison, nor was he wrong to see Marley as the true enemy controlling the narrative. The world wanted Eldians to disappear, and Eren knew they would never be safe as long as their enemies existed. And in some ways, he was right. The outside world viewed Eldians as devils, and history had proven that negotiations and diplomacy wouldn't change that. No matter what Paradis did, the rest of the world saw them as a threat. Knowing this, Eren made the ultimate decision: to eliminate everyone outside the island and secure his people's future once and for all. But here's where things went too far. Eren's solution was total genocide. Instead of finding another way to break the cycle, he became the cycle. His goal was to destroy those who wished harm upon his people, but in doing so, he erased innocent lives, men, women, children, people who had never even lifted a weapon against Eldians. In his mind, he was giving his people freedom, but in reality, he was taking away the freedom of countless others. This is why Eren lands at number 3 on our list. His fight for survival and freedom was justified, but his willingness to wipe out the entire world showed that he had lost himself in his own vision.
Bertolt. Reiner. Damn you! You traitors!
At number 2, we have Stain from My Hero Academia, a man who saw through the false hero society but took justice into his own hands in the most brutal way possible. Stain wasn't just some random villain causing chaos. He had a vision, and in many ways he was absolutely right. In the world of My Hero Academia, being a hero wasn't always about saving people. Many pro-heroes were just in it for the fame, wealth, and glory. They saw heroism as a career, not as a duty. To Stain, this was a betrayal of what a true hero should be. And honestly, he had a point. The hero system was flawed. It prioritized the image over integrity, allowing corrupt and selfish individuals to wear the title of hero, while real heroes like All Might became rare exceptions. Stain believed that only those who truly sacrificed themselves for others deserved to be called heroes, and he saw himself as the one to purge the frauds from society. But here's where things went too far. Stain didn't just call out the problem, he started murdering heroes to prove his point. His ideology may have been based on truth, but his methods turned him into something just as bad as the people he hated. Instead of inspiring reform, he became a symbol of fear. Even though he admired true heroes like All Might, he couldn't see a path to change that didn't involve bloodshed.
I'll make this right! Come on! Just try and stop me, you fakes!
And at number 1, we have Pain from Naruto, a man whose philosophy about suffering was painfully true, but whose methods made him the very thing he despised. Pain, also known as Nagato, didn't start out as a villain. He was once a child who believed in peace, guided by the ideals of his mentor, Jiraiya. But after losing everyone he loved in the midst of war, he came to a harsh realization. True peace could never exist as long as people were capable of causing pain. No matter how much hope someone had, war and suffering were inevitable. And in many ways, he was right. Throughout history, Naruto's world had been trapped in an endless cycle of violence, one nation attacking another, seeking revenge, and repeating the pattern over and over. Pain believed that the only way to break this cycle was to make the world understand true suffering firsthand. By using his overwhelming power, he would force people to feel pain, believing that only through shared suffering could humanity finally understand peace. But here's where things went too far. Pain believed peace could only be achieved through fear. Instead of seeking another way, he used destruction as a lesson, wiping out entire villages, including Naruto's home, the Hidden Leaf. He forced his vision of peace onto the world, assuming that if people experienced enough pain, they would be too afraid to ever start war again. But in doing so, he became just another piece of the endless cycle of hatred. This is why Pain lands at number 1 on our list. His philosophy about suffering and peace was deeply insightful, but his methods only created more destruction. He proved that pain could teach powerful lessons, but in the end, it was Naruto's ability to forgive and break the cycle that truly brought hope.
You and I are both seeking the very same thing. We both want to achieve the peace that Jiraiya-sensei envisioned. You and I are the same. We're both motivated by our desire for peace and justice. The justice that I have delivered against the Leaf Village is no different from what you are trying to do to me.
And that wraps up our list of 10 anime villains who were actually right, but took things too far. Each of these characters had a vision. Some saw corruption in their world, some wanted peace, and some believed the only way forward was through extreme measures. But in the end, their choices made them villains, not heroes. Which of these villains do you think had the most valid point? And do you think any of them could have achieved their goals without becoming villains? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep anime discussions. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.